everyone, and welcome to another episode of Inspiring Boys, Empowering Fathers, and Transforming Lives. Welcome back. I'm here with my partner, Dr. Jim Brown, and we're here to continue our discussions of what's happening in the education system. So today, we're going to talk about why is it such a difficult time to be a boy? Part one. We'll have a part two in the new year. So if you're wondering why it is, why we keep thinking it is, we're going to talk about it today. Jim, do you have anything to add?
Well, I'm happy to be on again with you, Linda. You do a great job, and I am quite inspired by it. So I'm glad you're doing it. And yes, this is really quite interesting. This is a very, very, very bad time to be a boy. Um, we had years where girls were disadvantaged, and the whole system seemed to be advantaging boys, and disadvantaging girls. But we really have a reverse situation now, and it really, really is a difficult time to be a boy. Um, and my best wishes go out to parents of boys, because you got your work cut out for you, folks, if you're going to make a difference for them, and it's part of transforming lives. So let's roll.
Okay, I just want to mention that Jim has done a lot of research in his career on this topic. So anything we say has been researched either through other universities, other people, Jim himself. So if you have any questions, we're happy to send you a copy of the book that Jim wrote. And feel free to dig more into it if you'd like to. So let's get into it. What we have here is a chart that talks about what was it like for a girl or a boy back in the 1980s versus what's it like today to be a girl or a boy. And we picked a few categories that we, talk about education itself. So we're just going to quickly go through this and show this to you. I know the chart is kind of wordy, but we're going to talk about it as we go along. So let's get into it. So we're looking at 1980s, and if we talk about courses, a lot of the girls were in secretarial and nursing courses. They weren't stopped from going into other courses, but they were encouraged to do secretarial and nursing, where the boys, did trades. They were encouraged to STEM. Computer science was starting to come out. So it was more encouraged to see boys in that area. And I can say that that's what it was like when I was in school. I did, girls were allowed to go into the other subjects. I did take computer science when I was in high school, one course, and most of the class was boys. But so, we're just saying this is what the trends were.
But today now we're looking at we've had a lot of work done on advancing girls, and so girls are now encouraged to work their way through all fields, and certainly there's been a focus on the whole idea of STEM. But it's really critical that we've said girls were disadvantaged, and this came to a head in the 1980s, and all kinds of efforts were made. For example, affirmative action, that wasn't the only one, to advance girls. But the unfortunate part of it, that was good, incidentally, but the unfortunate part is that it tended to not only leave boys standing behind, but in fact decreased boys and push them backwards. So now we see things coming out, for example, indicating it's really important to get people into trades. But this is largely focusing on boys. And the implication that's created there is academic areas are for girls, and boys who, of course, can't deal with academic areas. They should go into trades and low-skilled kinds of areas. Absolutely atrocious. And if you're a parent of a boy, this is bad news for you. If you're a parent of a girl, it's good news. But if you're a parent of a boy, it's bad news. And it's not allowing people to aspire to their genuine capabilities. In fact, it's increasingly telling boys that they aren't capable of these things, so they should, to use the term, settle for non-academic areas. Well, yes, boys and girls should be looking at non-academic areas, but they also should be uh, encouraged to be achieving to their maximum capability. And I think that's really important for us.
Another category is textbooks and storybooks for the younger grades. But, back in the 80s, they were typical role models, and you'd see in the books. But today, a lot of the, pardon me, a lot of the textbooks show women, or before they did, women in trades and men in trades, which is fine, but they tend to focus more on women again, and not so much on men and boys. And we were just chatting about brochures from colleges. Jim, you had mentioned earlier how you see more females and fewer males. Again, it's the unintended consequences of trying to give women the same opportunities as men, but somehow in the process we leave boys behind.
Well, one of the things that comes out of this is to pick up on the example you gave. I contacted Fanshawe College to look in terms of courses that I might want to take that would be of interest to me and expand my mind, if you'd like. And so I talked to Fanshawe College here in London, and they sent me brochures and catalogs of the course they offered. Well, if I went through the catalog, most of the students they showed were women. Now, that's a psychological factor there in terms of, well, should I really be looking at getting into this if it's something that largely women are involved with, or am I going to be kind of the odd man out? So I'm not saying they're doing this intentionally. I think they're doing it because they're focusing on encouraging women, but in the process, they are discouraging men from going to post-secondary education. And so for boys, there's a very limited focus on boys, if any at all. And we have to be concerned that, yes, we have to help equality, but we have to be careful that in the process of helping equality, we're not, in fact, encouraging one group and unintentionally, if you'd like, discouraging another. So we have to be very concerned about that. And I think that's one of the things we're dealing with at the moment.
Yeah, the other thing, which is interesting, and you see this in the younger grades, but also in high school, is behavior expectations have changed. So in the 80s, girls were expected to be, quiet, polite, compliant. And boys were encouraged to be more masculine characteristics like confident, strong, independent. There was competitions, more physical activity usually. Not exactly sure the longer recesses, but that type of thing was encouraged more for boys. And things have changed again today. And ask your children what's going on in their classroom, how they're expected to behave. What's happening, how they're feeling. But today the focus is more collaboration, and nothing wrong with collaboration. That's something that they've done the research, girls are better at collaboration and boys instinctively are more competitive. But that competitiveness has changed. Boys are encouraged to be quiet and orderly. Some schools remove recess or limit recess. And competition is not really, it's kind of almost discouraged, you could say, to some extent. So it's a different behavioral environment for your children in the classroom. So you may get told things like, your son is not sitting still, your son's not paying attention. It's just what boys are like. They don't like to sit still for very long. They like to, get involved. They're very hands-on. Where girls are not as hands-on as boys. And again, nothing wrong with that. It's just that they behave differently. And that's just in general. Maybe some girls don't like to sit still. So we're not saying it's all one or the other. We're just saying in general and based on research, that's how usually girls behave and boys behave, but the expectations are shifted. And that can be an issue for boys in the classroom.
And as these changes are taking place, we see it reflected in terms of how teachers, male or female, deal with what we would call normal outdoor behavior of girls and boys. And so the difficulty becomes one of if students are behaving the way the teacher behaved when she was a child, that's rewarded. If the student behaves in opposition to that, that's discouraged. And along with being discouraged, we see a discouragement in terms of the types of grades and marks that people are given. As the school system becomes almost totally feminine in terms of staff and leadership, boys at an enormous disadvantage unless they behave like girls. Now, in the broader society, outside the school, they can behave like boys, but when they get into the school, they have to change their behavior and adjust to behaving the way the school wants them to behave, which is basically like girls. Takes us to literacy and so on. So go for it, Lynda.
Yes, leads right into our next topic. So with girls, girls were stronger in literacy in the 1980s and not advanced in math and science. And boys, they were somewhat weaker in literacy back in the 80s and stronger in math and science. But today, girls are outperforming boys significantly in literacy. Now, you can see that from the EQOA scores in Ontario. Other provinces probably have other statistics, but we're seeing it across Canada and in other Western countries. And boys tend to continue to have weaker literacy skills. And math and science is about the same, but we still have that difference in literacy skills.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we recognize that, for example, Columbia University did a study with looking at children of kindergarten age, that would not junior kindergarten age, and they tested thousands of students, and they found that boys had weaker literacy skills than girls, and we have talked in our previous podcasts about reasons for that. But however, in terms of math and science, boys scored better than girls did in kindergarten. And that's not necessarily a biological issue. It's probably more to do with how boys and girls are raised and socialized. But they then interviewed the teachers of these children. They didn't show the teachers what the test scores indicated, but they asked the teachers for their opinion. Well, the test scores had shown girls slightly better than boys in literacy, and it showed boys better in math and significantly better in science. Well, when they interviewed the teachers consistently said that the boys were much weaker in literacy skills, and that the girls, in fact, were ahead of the boys in math and science. Now, that conflicted with what the test studies had shown, but the real complicator in all this was the fact that if the boy that the teacher was discussing exhibited a lot of female characteristics, he was seen as being more advanced in literacy skills, math, and science. In other words, if he was in effect a girly boy, if you'd like, then he was viewed as significantly better in those subject areas than boys were. So, I'm not saying that's intentional. But it is one of the important issues that we need to look at in terms of how we staff our schools. If in fact uh, the children are only taught by female teachers, you end up with boys coming home, and this is not maybe, this is absolutely true, because this has been brought to my attention a number of times by different individuals, that boys come home even in kindergarten and say they don't want to go to school anymore because school is for girls. So it's the things we need to look at.
Yeah, and as I said, like as Jim mentioned, these are studies that have done in universities, and so there is definitely information to back up what we're saying. But again, ask your kids, your boys and your girls, how they feel about school, and this particular category leads to higher dropout rates for boys. We see that in high school, and we also are seeing a big shift in the post-secondary education, where there's definitely far more girls than boys. It's more, well over the 50% um, uh, of women in university and college than men. So moving on, as we talked about, in the 1980s, there was an effort to make things equal. With no intention to leave boys behind, but this is what happened. So we focused on girls and we lost the focus on boys. And so that's how we lost the equality. So that's what happened for boys. So what are the obstacles for boys to become achievers? Like, what's holding them back? Where are the issues? What's happening? We're seeing it in a few areas. There's systematic injustice in society and in education. So what's happening is there's less support at home and in the community for boys. And part of that is there's fewer male role models in the community. And we need men to step up, men and dads, to be that role model at home and, if possible, in the community also.
But the other factor we're dealing with is that 80 years ago, chances are a boy had a father around in the house. Anyway, if he didn't, there were activities that could be involved in, for example, scouting, which would be all boys, Girl Guides for girls, and all scouts were for boys, and all male leaders. Well, now, of course, we still have Girl Guides for girls only, but in terms of scouts, they're now co-ed, which means they, by their own constitutions now, if there are girls in the scout pack, then they have to have female leaders. So it's no longer a boys' club, so to speak. It's a co-ed club, and those activities which would largely appeal to boys cease to be offered. And interestingly enough, and this is interesting too, we now have a situation where if a boy is in secondary school, and he plays for one of the boys' teams, if there's a girl better than he is, then the girl can play for that boy's team, and that boy now can no longer play because his place has been taken by a girl. On the other hand, he can't say, therefore, he wants to try it for the girls' team because only girls can play for the girls' team. So we have a serious problem here in terms of, and I'm not getting into the transgender issue here, but we do have a serious problem where if there were a total of 18 boys' places and 18 girls' places, you could conceivably have 18 girls plus one more playing for the boys' team, or perhaps two more playing for the boys' team. So they'd be 19 or 20. And meanwhile, the number of boys is reduced to something in the area of 16. Yeah, is that accomplishing what we want to accomplish in terms of equality? One has to wonder. anyway, I think this is a serious problem, but nobody wants to talk about it. And well, Lynda, you and I are talking about it.
Yeah, we're talking about it and just, creating awareness as to what's happening. And then when this happens for boys, they start to feel, when you're demeaning boys, you're creating lower aspirations for them. So they realize, okay, well, I can't do that, so why bother? And, you know, boys are very competitive. It's a natural thing. So competition is now replaced by cooperation. And again, cooperation is great. And there's studies showing that women are better at it. And that's great. We need cooperation, but sometimes we need competition to have something to strive for, to have goals and improve yourself. That's where the competition is important. Um, and without, and then the confidence isn't there, and without that lack of confidence, that of course leads to the many of the spiraling that we've talked about in previous podcasts, where if you don't have the confidence, you lose the interest, you don't feel supported, and then you start, your education starts to slip, and then you don't finish your high school, and then you don't get into post-secondary, and then what's more important is you lose the job opportunities, which has long-term effects, as we've talked about many times. What's happening socially? Well, we're seeing that we've talked about academically. And one of the important things we should talk about here is parents. When you're told your son is not doing too well, here's the EQA results, he's not really paying attention. So you start to expect less of your son than you do of your daughter. So, be aware of these things, be alert. Take a look at your son. How's he really doing? Test him yourself, see how he's doing. Maybe he's just not interested. So we've talked about before also, find something he's interested in. So he'll really dive into that subject. But, it's one thing to accept what the education system's telling you, and that's fine, but do your own research. Find out what's happening. Because if you have lower expectations, you created your, go ahead.
Yeah, it's really important that we as parents, we don't let other people basically convince us that our children, boys or girls, sort of aren't capable of doing this. Unfortunately, a lot of that comes from the bias of the teachers, not intentional, so don't misunderstand me, but in fact, as was indicated in the studies they did from Columbia University, if the teacher really is letting the gender issue over influence them in terms of the expectations, they tell the parents that the boys are not doing well, and so everybody's expectations go down, including the students. This is really important.
Absolutely.
In terms of demeaning boys and men in social media, that's an important one. So go for it, Lynda.
Well, we're seeing it in the portrayal of dads and boys in TV. And again, we're just looking for the other side. Like just something simple like The Simpsons. Homer Simpson is a kind of a bumbling man. It's Marge that seems to have the smarts. It's Marge that seems to help out Homer, and it's funny. It's a good laugh. But where's the other side where men, are good dads and in the stronger role models? So we see that happening out there. And again, we're looking for balance. That's what we're here for. You see it in commercials. And you also see it in social media, which is, very contentious, but, watch what your kids are watching on social media. Take a look at it yourself. Men are quite often demeaned in social media.
Yeah, and it's important. I challenge you to, when you're looking at commercials, to see if, in fact, the male character in the commercial is he doesn't know how to handle this problem, and sure enough, to be a female, his wife, his partner, another female employee, whatever, and she will solve the problem. Now, if that happens once or twice, that's one thing, but when it happens consistently, what are we basically telling boys? Probably that they're not as capable. And this goes back to the whole issue of what we're trying to do here, and that is we're trying to inspire boys to reach their potential. Because this is an issue, when we use the term underachieving, we're basically saying you're not achieving to the potential that you have. And we're not just saying you're not achieving, we're saying you aren't reaching your potential. So if in fact through we're demeaning boys and men in various areas of social media or in education, the fact of the matter is we are in the process restricting them from achieving to their potential. And that has significant influence in terms of our ongoing life and our aspirations and our achievements.
And we've talked about it before, and I'll just touch on it very briefly because we're running out of time. But books, a lot of books now where female role models are outperforming males. Now, girls need that as a female. Yeah, that's great, but we need to have a balance. Boys are often portrayed as cowardly. They're morally confused. They need to be rescued. Where girls seem to be morally superior. They're more resilient. They're emotionally intelligent and kind of natural leaders, which is good. Again, we're talking about balance. And one of the examples of this is Hunger Games, which a lot of teenagers read. And as we know, it was turned into the movies. But take a look at the characters, watch it again or read it again, and see the difference between the female characters and the male characters. And we're again looking for a balance. So how are boys being influenced, Jim? What's really happening, and what does that do to them? Can you talk about your diagram?
This one's quite significant because if you look at the outline that's given here, the dark lines indicate a significant influence, and the checkered line is a minor influence. So you see that society, parents, and the school system all have a significant influence on boys. Meanwhile, the school system has an influence on parents when it convinces parents that boys are, your son is not, doesn't have it, kind of thing. He should not pursue an academic career and find some other area to go into. Now, in terms of the influence that parents have on schools, you can see it's only a minor influence. And it shouldn't be like that, because the fact of the matter is the parents are the first educators, and I mean first in primacy, first in importance of their children. And if we've reached the point where now the school has taken that over and parents are no longer the significant influence, and we have a problem. If you go back in history in Canada, in Ontario, certainly in Ontario, the common school system, the public school system, was created so that parents would come together and build a school and for their children and hire a teacher. And if the teacher's work wasn't satisfactory, they replaced the teacher. Well, that's all changed now, and yet the concept hasn't changed. It's just the practice has changed. So parents need to be very concerned about this, and have to be very concerned about the fact that the school may be unintentionally giving negative ideas to parents. Well, moving along, Lynda, I think we're dragging our feet here.
Yes, this is a great diagram. So take a closer look at it later on. So what do we need to do for dads? So what's happening? Well, dads need to kind of take a look and try and change your perspective. Ask yourself some important questions. Do I spend less time reading to my son than I do with my daughter? If you have a son and a daughter, take a look at that. Take a look at your confidence in your son's academic abilities. Do I have less in my son than in my daughter? Take a close look at how you're talking to your children and looking at what you're doing with them.
Are we providing our boys with less encouragement than we do our girls? And so when boys and girls are in secondary school, for example, am I encouraging my daughter to prepare herself for post-secondary education, and meanwhile preparing my son for the world of work? We've got to be conscious of that, and that's how we have to have, as dads, we have to look at our perspectives. And is my manner of dealing with my son, is it helping or is it hindering his belief in himself and in his personal development? We want him to have high aspirations for himself. And so I encourage you as dads, just as myself as a dad, to ask ourselves these questions. What am I prepared to do to counteract society's demeaning of men and boys? What am I prepared to do to affect how the school system operates, for example? Do I vote for a trustee? Or do I simply ignore all those areas?
Yeah, it's important to get out and vote. Find out what your trustees believe before you vote for them.
Yeah.
And it's important in all areas. So there's some things, dads, take away, think about it. Look at what you're doing next time you're dealing with your son or your daughter. It's really important. They need the encouragement, and they need the support, and they need to achieve. So because we're out of time, we're going to move this into a part 2. We're going to talk about it further in our next podcast, and talk about why it's a difficult time to be a boy. It's really important. So send us your comments. We'd like to hear from you. Our website is inspireboys@menandfamilies.org. Feel free to fill out our survey. Send us an email. We'll send you a survey. And again, like I mentioned, if you want data to support what we're talking about, Jim's happy to send you free of charge a copy of his book, Rescuing Our Underachieving Sons. Happy to send that to you. So send us an email, because we want to hear from you, because we're here for you to talk about things to help you. So we want to make sure that we're helping you. We want to empower you, dads out there, so you can inspire your sons and transform their lives.
So thank you very much for having watched this episode. And hey, we look forward to you joining us in the next one.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.